uncomfortable to the point where he voluntarily shuts up because there is no logic behind racism. There just isn't. Um, there's no logic behind it. There's also it contradicts the beliefs of those who are racist. It contradicts their every thought, any single thought or comment or idea that they have about racist or their racism. It's no logic to it. It doesn't follow. It doesn't make sense. And you, as a white person, challenge it. Just challenge it. I mean, it's that simple. Challenge it. And I believe, honestly, that it does work because this was what they were doing. They were blocking the challenge or the potential challenge to their racism. Let me be in my racism all alone or with everybody else with no challenge, no pushback or nothing. This is what they wanted. Because now I can just continue to be in my stupidity and everyone else is either just going to accept it that I'm just in my stupidity or just I'm just that type of person or they're going to leave or not be around me. That's what they want. And so each time you see Uncle Racist and you go the other way, I challenge you to go towards them and have some information in your arsenal when you go towards him. Because I can almost guarantee you he can't refute it. And you'd also easily wrap him up in his racism to the point where he'll start questioning if his racism is sane. Because it isn't. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And I think that's what our job is, to challenge that stupidity. It's nothing wrong with that. Now this is the governor. He's over the entire state. He sent the National Guard to stop the black kids from entering Central High School. When the 9 students did get into the building, a few weeks later, a full-scale riot broke out, and they had to escape in speeding police cars. Now, mind you, the governor is someone who controls the state. They control law enforcement within the state. Um, well, I can't say with the exception because the governor does control it. Does control law enforcement. They do have different jurisdictions and things like that, but the governor controls the jurisdictions throughout the whole state. So, yeah, but the governor does control law enforcement all throughout the state. hmm He controls, of course, the National Guard. Um, I can't say the governor had the power to to um to control law enforcement, and he had the power to get rid of that mob that was pretty much staked out in front of Central High School, waiting for the black kids. The governor had the power. That's no question or debate there. Um, I it was just making me think about how the different law enforcement agencies fight over jurisdictions and how you have cities and um they are the law enforcement is established through the city ordinances, and then you have the sheriffs, which is totally different, and they are under a different command. But when I think about the state as a whole, because the state has its own law enforcement agency too, which is, whatever it may be, state troopers. And then they also have the power to deploy National Guard. But, no, not but, and in those instances, those law enforcement entities would have to give commands to those local law enforcement agencies. So, yeah, the governor had all the power. He could have stopped it. Um, so the Little Rock Nine weren't able to enroll until 2 days later when President Eisenhower sent 1,200 paratroopers from the 101st Airborne Division with bayonets fixed. Oh my gosh. This doesn't make sense. The soldiers escorted the students single file into the school and dispersed the jeering protesters. Although troops remained at Central High School throughout the school year, the Little Rock Nine were subjected to verbal and physical assaults on a daily basis. Of course, these kids in high school are copying their parents. If not, hell, some of these high school kids was probably out there in the mob. And when the mob dispersed, they went their ass into school. Because, that's what white people do. They take their kids on uh, violent sprees. They bring the kids. Remember, lynchings were picnics. They used to take pictures in front of the burnt bodies or the dead carcasses hanging from trees. That was, that was normal for them. Some people still have those pictures, those postcards. The African American students were isolated and never placed in classes with each other, so they couldn't corroborate their torment. Now, that says something else. Because they isolated the kids, didn't place them in classes together. That was something that was orchestrated by administration and or the teachers. Because teachers can do unofficial schedule changes. Of course, we know administration have all the power to do official schedule changes. So when enrolling them, they made it. They made it. They especially made sure that they didn't put them all together. That's so sad. This one don't know what's going on with that one, and that one don't know what's going on with that one. But in reality, the same thing is happening to all of them because they are surrounded by the same type of people that came from the same type of racist ass houses. Can almost guarantee you that. On 3 separate occasions, Minnie Jean had cafeteria food spilled on her, but none of her white abusers ever seemed to get punished. Of course they did, because those in the school agree with it. In December 1957, she dropped her chili-laden tray on the heads of 2 boys in the cafeteria who were taunting and knocking into her. She said, "I got tired of this shit." And I don't blame her. She was suspended for 6 days. 6 days. And she had just got to the school. She hadn't even been there, fool. What? She wasn't, well, hell, they couldn't sit out for 2 weeks from when they first enrolled. I mean, this is ridiculous. Now, remember how we measure funding. Students have to be present, and the funding that they were receiving or that they would receive for these kids the following school year, they most likely missed out that funding because they were suspending the kids. And then also, they didn't finish the school year out. So essentially, for the citizens of the state, because those are federal dollars that they get, but there's also state dollars too. Most of the larger amount of the money comes from federal. So in a sense, when you think about it, the state lost money in doing this. But again, this is something that they are willing to sacrifice. And some of them I don't believe had no idea that's what they were doing. But they didn't care. They were so, you know, they were basking in their racism. The school noticed how part the school notice that she received for the suspension is now part of the Smithsonian collection, along with a heartfelt note by her parents documenting all the abuse that their daughter had endured leading up to the incident. Then, February 1958, Tricky verbally responded to some jeering girls who had hit her in the head with a purse. The retaliation caused Tricky to be expelled from Central High School. Mm-mm-mm. So she said something to them for them hitting her. Now, she didn't respond physically, she only responded verbally. But yet, she was physically removed from the school for the entire remaining year. Mm-mm. That retaliation caused Tricky to be expelled. And she says, I had a sense of failure that lasted for decades over that. After she left Central, white students held printed signs that said, 1 down, 8 to go. Mm-mm. Now, these were the students. Now, what's your purpose? You didn't set out to do this. Now, when you have all 8 of them, then what? I I just don't understand it. You've made it your purpose to, I mean, shit. I guess now they'll just go back to tormenting each other. Cause remember, they not exempt from that. They was tormenting each other before we even got there, before we was even in schools with them. So I guess that's just what they build their whole lives on, tormenting each other. Following her mid-year dismissal, Tricky was invited to New York to live in the home of Dr. Kenneth and Mamie Clark, African American psychologists who had conducted pioneering research that exposed the negative effects of segregation on African American children. Their now famous doll tests were part of the documentation used by the NAACP to argue the Brown v. Board of Education case. Tricky went on to attend Southern Illinois University and majored in journalism. In 1967, she married Roy Tricky, a fisheries biologist, and they started a family which eventually included 6 children. They moved to Canada to protest the Vietnam War, and she earned both a bachelor's and master's degree in social work. Later in her career, she returned to the United States and served in the Clinton administration as Deputy Assistant Secretary for Workforce Diversity at the Department of Interior. Now she works as an activist on behalf of peacemaking, youth leadership, the environment, and many other social justice issues. According to her kids, it took nearly 30 years before Tricky revealed to her children the full extent of her role as a foot soldier in the Civil Rights Movement. In 1996, 7 of them appeared on the Oprah Winfrey Show and reconciled with some of the white students who had tormented them. I wonder if the adults ever reconciled. It seems like something worth exploring, especially now with the emergence of similar behavior. You know, CRT this, CRT that. A year later, and 40 years after the original crisis, then President Bill Clinton symbolically held the door open at Central High School for the 9. Clinton also awarded each of them the Congressional Gold Medal in 1999. In today's world, where our education system and narratives are often challenged, it's more important than ever to teach the true history of our people. The things we value